Hello,
Hi,
hello.
everybody.
We're back from our long sojourn.
We have missed this book and missed together
Yes.
over the past, I think, 6
Yes.
weeks. So we really sorry.
It's been a long.
Yes, like you guys, time flies and we get busy and things happen, and then here we are.
Here
And
we
if
are.
we're not intentional about scheduling this and doing this for you and with you, then time gets away from us. So we've missed you. We're back, and we're
Yes.
glad. We're
Speaking
glad.
of dysfunctional patterns, to conscious choices. We made a conscious choice to get our butts here together today.
We did. So we're picking up on stage 2, which is on page 78 or 77. And just kind of a recap, we've talked a lot about just the overviewing kind of theme of this book is really to just kind of start really looking at ourselves as parents and really, being intentional, being conscious of what kinds of factors play into our lives and influence our parenting.
Yes.
Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, parenting is, factors that play into our parenting. I feel like, when you play a game, you kind of know what the rules are and all the pieces and the players and stuff. With parenting, I feel like the game changes every 5 minutes. I'm like,
The rules change.
Wait,
Yes.
yeah, I was
Yes.
good at that. I was good at that yesterday, but now it's completely different. So
I just had a dad say that yesterday.
yes,
Parenting doesn't come with a manual. I'm like, we hear that all the time.
no.
And this is a good, I mean, this book is a good place to start, especially as you continue practicing some of the strategies that maybe you've received through training or coaching from us. But really, this takes it even a little bit deeper. And especially today, when we get towards kind of the end of stage 2, we're gonna really challenge you to try to dig into some of this on your own without us going too in depth in it, because
Yeah.
it really is it's a journey of self exploration, and really to be intentional on who we are and even just the stages of parenting and how that changes for us as our kids grow too.
And really, the part that she's referring to that we really need you to dig in and kind of see if you can find yourself in there. It's really important for you to spend time doing that, even if it's uncomfortable, because it will help move the next part of the work forward in addressing where that ego protection comes from, to protect the inner child that didn't get what the inner child needed. And so that's a really important piece. So here we go.
All right.
Oh my goodness. What we're going to be more mindful of time.
Yes,
right.
We're gonna try to
trip the highlights.
give you the abridged version. Is that the short version?
Yeah,
Abridged.
the shorter. We're gonna give you
Abbreviated.
the director's cut.
There you go. There you go. So Dr. Chiavelli tells a story about a dad and his son, and how the dad's intentions to become his sports coach was super good, right? Like, I think as a youth coach myself, I think that was our intention, right? Oh, I want to be more involved. I want to experience this joy with my child. I want to spend my time with them, blah, blah. And sometimes it can totally backfire, because we're often harder on our kids in a coaching situation than we might be on other kids, and how do our kids perceive that. So she goes through and tells a story about how that kind of backfired pretty strongly for a father-son duo. But until a dad was really willing to look at himself, it was a journey. And she said for this particular family, it took almost a year for them to really get to break through that defense mechanism that the dad was trying to tell himself and convince himself of, that he was doing his best job for his kid, regardless of how his kid was perceiving it. So it was a good story to kind of help recognize that, it's not uncommon for parents to approach things that way, but then to dig into it and kind of break through that, it can be hard, and it's hard work. And I can appreciate that with the families we've had that have started that work with us, and having some of those challenging conversations, and being willing to just reflect and be like, you know what, yes, I'm a part of this. I may not be the cause of it,
right,
but I'm certainly a factor in what's happening in my home, and my reactions and my responses to kids are in some ways meeting my own needs and not my kids'.
Yeah. And we'll see that over and over again that you know, as parents, we feel like we get in this cycle, like I'm just trying to get my kids to do XYZ. And I start really good, and then there's this, and then it goes to this, and it goes to this, and then everybody's all tied up in a knot. And the thing that I see that comes out each time is that in order to stop that cycle between parent and child, one of them has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And the child's not capable because they're younger developmentally, they're not understanding it, and they're kind of an innocent bystander in many instances. And so this is where we got to do the work on ourselves to see what our part is to stop that cycle.
And the interesting part about that is as we'll read in step 8 is that, you know, sometimes it's expected that the adult is the one to stop because you're in this cycle with the child. But if we are really mindful of where we are at emotionally, sometimes as adults, we act like children too. And
100%.
and so then you've got like two child egos that are going to bat here, and sometimes the adult can't stop either. And
Yeah.
then I mean, until like bedtime when we go to bed, and then we feel like
Sometimes not even
totally
that.
awful about ourselves and how we just handle it.
Well,
So-
and that's what we were just talking about with the family. Like if you're when we're trying to work with a family and we've got a parent and a child and the bone to kind of reevaluate how did we get here and how do we avoid it.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
doesn't work.
it's hard work. It's hard work. So step 7, on page 84, if you're following along with us, it just talks about your 2 eyes. Okay. And one, I'm going to go back to the 2 eyes. One of them,
These ones.
these, no, not those. The 2 eyes are, one is the inner child. Okay. Eye for inner child. And the second eye is our imposter ego. Okay, so the inner child, and a lot of this is laying the foundation, laying some of the groundwork for where is our inner child and at what stage is that child at, and what needs did that child, our inner child, get met, and what needs did our inner child not get met. Okay. And then the second eye is our imposter ego, which in essence, I'm reading right from the book on the bottom of page 89. It's in essence a collection of all the masks we wear to fulfill our innate desires to be seen as whole, complete, and worthy. And I mean, some of this stuff, you guys, I don't know about you, but I mean, this is kind of a hard read. I think we came into this is a hard chapter, and we kind of set the stage for that growing into this. But when we really I'm going to just preface this by saying there were some things in these next couple of pages or several pages that I agree with. And there were some of them I'm like, no. Right. And so then when I start to disagree with it, I immediately stop and check myself and be like, okay, why do I want to disagree with that?
Yeah.
Because it's hurtful.
Yeah.
For me to be like, no, I don't agree with that. That's not me. That's not why I'm acting. But if I can continue to be open to it, whether I agree with it or not, it helps bring a level of consciousness to my parenting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Shefali actually says on 88, when she's talking about the inner child, she said, we developed this fearful inner child because we were raised by unconscious parents in an unconscious culture. Now, I mean, for some kids, they're actually being raised by an unconscious level of parenting where they're disinvolved or disengaged kind of stuff. But I mean, even just generationally and culturally, the way things used to be done in the past, you know, children were seen and not heard. There wasn't the same kind of engagement that we're talking about now with kids today because of what our kids today are facing. It's very different. And so, again, not in judgment of the past and who influenced us. We're not looking to assign blame or who violated our inner child, but it's almost like when you take the child to the doctor, well, they need certain supplements, they're lacking in certain things. We're doing that with our inner child. We're assessing our inner child and say, what is our inner child lacking, and how do we give the inner child that so it can be whole, so that can then come out in our parenting.
Yeah. And the exploration that helps in that process is what Dr. Shefali calls masks, right? We mask the feelings, or we put on these masks unbeknownst to us. But those, once we have those masks on, it comes out in different ways that we approach and respond to behavior, and how we do that to meet our own needs, and we're not even aware of it, you know. So um, the masks represent, at the top of page 90, are desperate attempts to do two things: protect our inner child from further parental invalidation, right? Like, I don't want anybody, or I don't want to feel like I'm invalid, and I don't want anybody to see me, or I don't want to look like I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, the perfect parent to anybody else who's watching me.
Mhm.
The other thing it does is, if possible, creates ways to artificially buy love, validation, and worth artificially. Like, we're gonna fake it. We're gonna not have these deep, genuine relationships with our kids. And we're gonna do what we think is the right thing to do to build those connections, but
Mhm.
really, in whose perception?
Yeah.
In our view of the world, or is it really making a
Mhm.
difference to our kids?
Um, I was just getting to the putting into practice, page 92, because I don't know, sometimes I know there's people in my life that when I talk about, you know, we really need to get to know our inner child, and they're like, hippy dippy doodah, like it's like whatever. But there really is an aspect of ourselves. She says, getting to know, on page 92, getting to know your inner child is an important step on your path to empowerment, empowering yourself, and being able, when you can empower yourself, then you can empower your kids, and it doesn't become. So it's really, the other thing that I kept hearing as I read was, we really have to slow things down. We have to allow time for pause to say, you know, how am I feeling right now? Why did I just react in such a way when you know, my child said that they brushed their teeth and they really hadn't? Why? Because that didn't need the big response that it got, but it came out just sort of knee jerk.
Right. One of the ways that you can put this into practice is to just try to do that, right? Like, and the example that they give here is that Dr. Shefali has some questions to just use as intentional reflection tools as you kind of go about your day. She says, write these 6 questions on cards and place them where you can see them throughout the day. And then as you pay attention to your inner voice, you can be surprised by what you discover. So some of the questions are things like exactly what Lori said. What is my inner feeling right now? Am I feeling fear? Am I afraid of something happening? Am I feeling calm? Is my response coming from a state of lack or from one of abundance? Am I needing validation and approval, or am I afraid of rejection and abandonment? And am I afraid of conflict and being seen as bad? And what are my fears right now? Because much of what we have heard so far is response out of fear. Fear for not being enough, or
Yeah.
good enough, or, you know, making people disappointed, or whatever that is, comes from that fear and that worry. So if those are some things that you want to be more mindful of, that might be something for you to consider.
And those can be really primal feelings, particularly with some of the families that we've worked with, that really their ability to stay together as a family is in question. And then they have reaction and very fearful about, how does that make me look? How is that going to be perceived? And we operate from a place of fear, and operating from a place of fear, unless you're running from a bear, is never effective.
It's difficult to do this. Okay. So, and this is, as I was reading through it, I felt like, yeah, this is going to be hard for me.
Yeah,
Number one, to just even pause.
I was exhausted reading
It
them
is.
all. I'm like, oh me.
Yeah. So, just a word of, you know, caution is that, it's difficult to start this journey because it's a healing journey. Okay. To really look inside yourself, to figure out, like, who am I? Where did I come from? And what makes me who I am without blaming or shaming myself. Okay. So she says, an easier place to start on this is at the level of your reaction. Okay. So instead of trying to dig right down into the deep and dirty right now, just start with gauging your reaction to things. This is the level of the imposter ego, that second eye. Like, why is this easier to begin? Because this isn't, the ego is easy to observe, right? The ego causes havoc, conflict, separation, dysfunction. It acts out, it implodes, and reactions of our ego are easier to spot. Okay, than
Yes.
the subtle,
Because
deep,
they're kind
deeply,
of big.
yeah, then finding the reactions of your inner child. So if that's at least a place to start, like just kind of, and we've kind of talked about that, checking, like, why do I respond that way? Okay, then that will kind of help your imposter ego.
I wonder if it would be helpful to like that emotion wheel that we have that has like
Mhm.
those few primal
Mhm.
ones in the middle, and then as it spreads out might be useful
Yeah.
in doing this, because we can identify anger really quickly, but as we go forward, we're going to be looking at, okay, the anger is the
What's
action.
showing.
So what is it that's at the root of that led to the anger?
Yes,
Because
okay.
anger is a safer emotion to demonstrate. Sometimes it's not, but it's just we revert to that kind of primally, instead of saying, oh, I felt invalidated, or I felt betrayed, or
Right.
that kind of thing.
Usually anger comes out as a secondary emotion.
Yes.
Right, because it's normal, it's normalized, and because it's the easiest one we can think of, like that's what it looks like. But when I'll share that feeling wheel in the comments of this this post, and you'll be able to see what we mean by looking at from the inside of the circle out. You identify some of those core feelings that we all are very familiar with, but as you start to dig into and reflect on, well, where is this really coming from? Where's my anger really coming from? You work your way out, and you'll see that it breaks down into even more feelings that maybe make even more sense.
Yeah, and that are more accurate for the inner child. Yeah.
All right, so step 8, this is catch your ego. And again, we're talking about masking, which, it's not Halloween masks, but it's just the ways that we show ourselves and protect ourselves. And sometimes we're aware of that and sometimes not.
And this also is not like neurodivergent masking.
Right.
This is like,
Right.
this is a persona that we use to communicate when our inner child is feeling invalidated or violated. And catching your ego, at top of page 96, she talks about the ego mask. So the things to look for is yelling, screaming, cursing at your child, self-blaming or self-criticizing, withdrawing in rejection or fear. It might be, I just got to get out of here, or I'm done with this. It might look like that. Isolating yourself or shutting down, where communication stops and I just can't, and I'm frozen. So we're going to talk about the categories. Those are the symptoms that you're looking for, and we're going to talk about kind of the overarching categories of those masks.
And this is the kind of where it gets a little bit deeper, but she says the only way out of these patterns is to dig in. And, we caution you because you're doing this independently. If we were doing this as a group or doing this in person, we could help navigate some of those feelings that might come out as you dig into this work. So we're just going to caution you to take care of yourself when if you're starting to feel overwhelmed and you're starting to feel like this is too painful for me, this is hurting my inner child, it's hurting my ego.
Yes.
Right? Then take a break, you guys. Okay. Don't think that you've got to go through this. Pause the video and pause your reading and just be like, I'm not in a place where I can handle this right now because I'm fragile. And we go through that as parents, and we can't, don't put your goal of getting through this ahead of don't put your goals for change ahead of your ability to manage the process of change. Okay.
Yeah, because if you've just gone through an interchange with your kids that was really challenging, and if it was really challenging, even if it was a week ago and you're still processing, maybe don't pick at the scab right now, because that's what it feels like. I think the other thing to remember is that as we talk about these imposter masks, these ego masks, we can be really kind of pissed and think the ego is a bad thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, but really, the ego's only motivation is to protect your painful spots. That's the whole purpose of it. And so when we don't have those painful spots anymore, the ego goes, okay, it's all right. It's all right. But she talks about because the ego was created during our childhood as a means of survival, there's nothing wrong with it needing to survive. It employs mechanisms that are primitive, childlike, immature, childish, including that yelling, screaming, some addictions, self harm, and self sabotage. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sadly, those, those things don't work.
No, they don't.
And
They work in the instant
in the moment,
to survive, but we
Yeah.
want to do more than survive, right? We want to we don't want to survive our child rearing years. We want to thrive and give our kids a leg up to the next level of thriving and maybe not having to do the same work that we have to do now, to kind of move forward, and each generation can improve.
Mhm. Some of you might be familiar with the 3 F's of what we now know as toxic stress or trauma response, the fight, flight, or freeze. It's the natural way that we do respond to protect ourselves. Dr. Shefali's constructed what she calls 5 parental ego categories to help us identify our imposter egos. So she calls them, and this is where it's a lot. So just take all this, at your own speed. The 5 F's, okay? Fighters, as you can imagine,
Yep.
they want to duke it out. Fixers, the rescuers,
Rescuers,
yeah.
helicopters.
the feiners,
I think it's feigners.
feiners.
Yeah, those
Like
are the
you,
like people pleasers.
yes, like a feign.
Yeah.
And feign. Okay.
Yeah.
Feiners, the freezers, like I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I'm just in shock.
I'm
And then
not.
the fleers that run, that are just
Yes.
like, I'm out, I'm done, I'm getting in my car and driving away.
Can I tell you something really sweet? I'm sorry. This
Yes.
sad. Okay, so my son that we adopted out of the foster system called me recently, and he's coming up against, I mean, his inner child was like stomped, and so
Mm.
he's been doing all this work as a teenager. Yes, that's fine. We have a fan on. Okay, so he's doing all of this work. He doesn't have children yet, and he called me, and he was up against one of these things that's really a trigger, and he called me, he's like, I don't want to do things the way that I've always done. I've always run. Like when I get up against this, I just check out and I have to go. He's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to stay in it.
Wow.
And so we talked about like, okay, well, what do you get from running? And then, and after the run, you still have to deal with the whatever. So what's a way that we could deal with without running? Pause,
Mhm.
breathe, and can we address this a different way? And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
look at
Big
you.
step.
Like, yeah. And that's generational stuff. I mean, when we're talking about, I mean, odds are if your inner child is injured, your parents' inner child was injured, and going on back. And so doing this really work can stop that generational trauma.
Absolutely.
It can really help us.
Awesome.
And as a we can do this. I love that she says in the middle of 7, as you read through these categories, have a curious and adventurous spirit. Just be curious, because she's not asking, we're not asking, nobody's going to ask you to like choose all these things and hold them up to crucify yourself. These are the things that I've done. But when we're able to identify some of these things in ourselves, then we can address them and they lose their power, and we can address things in a much more
Mhm.
healthy way. So
I had to chuckle because she says, approach this journey with an open and playful mind as if you're diagnosing yourself. Maybe you guys have seen those social media posts where people have like written on a piece of paper and they
Oh.
have like words here. And
Yeah,
I want to
and
be
then
like, I'm a fighter. I'm a fleer. I want as I was reading all those, I thought that would be really funny to do that for you guys and just identify all
I
these
need a
ones that I
stack.
am. I know. I'm like, do we have time for
because there's
15
the
cards?
there's the 5 F's,
Oh yeah.
but under each one of those F's are like subcategories.
Mhm.
So this takes some time, and sometimes they kind of intertwine and overlap. And so, maybe if you want to pace yourself, maybe you just, the fighters is the first category that she goes over. Maybe you just look at the fighters and say, is there any part of me? Do I see any part of me in here? And then just keep a list. Like this, I might be this.
Mhm.
Or if it's easier, my mom was this, my dad was this, my boss is this.
My neighbor,
Yes.
my sister, my
Yeah.
I know my best friend acts like this sometimes. I mean,
Yes.
sometimes it's easier to see that in other
100%.
people, and then that kind of helps normalize it for ourselves. So
Yeah.
we just for the sense of time and to not confuse people even more. If you are curious about more of these chapters, I mean, like literally I'm just trying to page through. It's like 40, almost 40 pages of discussion on these 5 parental egos.
And like there's
Um,
5 fighters.
Yes. So
So
in the sake of time and not to be able to confuse you, because this is really self-reflective work, and it's not even like meant to diagnose. It's meant for awareness, just for raising a level of consciousness. So we're not going to go through all of those. Now, if you are curious and you do not have the book and you want to know more about that, let us know, because I'm sure that there's a way we can or maybe at some point we just do a separate little blurb on some of those
yeah,
and dig into that for extra kind of
the names
extra.
are kind of fun. I thank her for that.
Yeah.
I thank her.
I mean, it'd be fun. You know what? Maybe what we'll do is put a poll out there and say, okay, who do you think you are? And we'll see. Because I know I think I'm about 7 of, yes.
The half-assed.
I know, half-assed parent. I'm like, oh, if you're curious about that one,
Is the half-assed better than the deadbeat? Probably.
Yes.
The
yes.
yo-yo.
Oh,
my
I even
goodness.
put like there's one called the superhero. Yeah, right here in my book. Guess what I put?
Yeah, if you
It's
had
me.
if you
Question mark.
if you hadn't put that, I might have drawn your attention to.
But see, and then and I was able to look at like, is this my husband? I think this is my husband, right? And here's the thing: it's not that you're just like one of them at any time.
Mm-mm.
These are like interwoven, obviously, and sometimes like I look at my children specifically, like I think for one, I was a superhero parent, and for one,
Yes.
I was a rescuer parent, and for the other child, like I see these patterns more obviously now. It doesn't, I mean, it is what it is.
It is.
I mean, yeah, would I have done things a little differently now? Sure.
Yeah.
But now that I know, that just helps me realize that these patterns and these things, like I can change them now. Like
Yes.
I can totally change them
Yes.
now. So
Yes.
so that's another
Yeah.
idea. And we want to be able to just be mindful, but we know that reading through all of these would be probably be a little bit confusing. And I don't know if it's really
No.
time effective. Which she does get to though at the end. So if you do want to kind of dig into those, and I'm guessing if you even Google like her 5 parenting egos, you'd probably find something online. We haven't done that yet, so don't quote me. But if I do find something, I'll link it below. But when you put these things into practice, she talks about like these ego masks, right? That those masks are not bad. They have saved and protected us from times of pain.
Yeah.
And
Which means it could have been worse.
Yeah, right.
It could have been worse.
Right. Hoofda. Spotting your ego doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And being aware of these masks is a step in breaking those old patterns, right? So like that's the part of this journey, is that you guys have all at some point, because you've been connected with us in one way or another, you have attended coaching or training because you wanted to break those patterns. You wanted to be able to kind of say, okay, what's a better way for me to be a better parent, a better teacher, you know, a better family member, even a better caregiver of my elderly parents, because that's another hard, I know, right? It's a whole nother saga of relationships. So thinking about what's predominant, what's secondary for you. And then she does give a little, kind of a little graph on how you can put some relationships that you might have in your life, what your primary mask might be for those relationships, and what your secondary mask might be, and then memories or feelings you have around those relationships. And I'm going to give a shout out to Coach Anna, who watches and listens to these videos and goes through and does some really nice visual graphics for you as another way to process. So I'm sure
That's one of her superpowers.
that's her superpower. And I'm not saying she has to or she will, but Anna, when you're watching, I'm pretty sure you're going to put in some comments in the chat that will probably involve a diagram that looks very similar to this one in the book.
Can I bring up too that as we identify the masks, okay, that and she describes it in kind of a way that feels a lot like when you set a new boundary with a child.
Oh.
That the ego is going to say, I don't trust this process. It's dangerous for me. And so some of these imposter masks can kind of ramp up their juice. And it's just you communicating with yourself to trust yourself. Like, this is a new way. I'm going to try a new way. And it's going to both heal my inner child and give me greater capacity to do things I need to do today. But some of those things, and we talked about addiction as one of the imposter masks. That's one of the things that sometimes people employ for survival. And she talks about a person who was in therapy and was making great progress. And I think we've seen this too. We're making great progress. We're getting close to dismantling some things. And then there's this shutdown, or it might be self-sabotage, it might be whatever, but there's a disengagement and a fear because the patterns are going to change, and that's an uncomfortable feeling. Because the devil, is still comfortable. Like, I know how to respond. And when you make those shifts, it's kind of a free fall kind of feeling, and that's uncomfortable. So realize that there's going to be discomfort. And if you're like, oh, I'm making progress on this and I'm really letting go of this shackle on my inner child, and you revert and fall backwards, it's okay. It's almost expected. And when you've been doing well and then you have a relapse, just like with addiction, it's kind of even more an eye opener. Like, wow, I had come so far. And sometimes we stop the work because of shame, and we feel self-loathe, like, oh, I was fooling myself so that I could change. And now I just proved to myself that I can't. And your ego is saying, I told you so. And so just be gentle with yourself through that, because it's a process. It's not, and it's gonna ebb and flow, and that is all okay. And expected.
We were just talking about that actually at the recent parenting class, about how when, even as parents, like, so we're talking about our own journey through this, right? And trying to take it easy on ourselves when we might suffer a setback. And we can expect that then, then our behaviors might escalate. We get frustrated with ourselves. And that's the same that we can expect with kids when we're trying to change the way that we respond to them, that it's expected that their behaviors will escalate, because their safety zone as they know it is now changing. When they are able to predict your reaction, and they're able to predict how you're going to respond in the punishment or this consequence, or how, whatever's going to happen in this situation, that's safe for your child. But when you start to change the way you respond to them and their behavior, chances are that's going to throw them for a tailspin because now
Mhm.
they're like, wait a minute, why is my mom not yelling? Why? I don't know what to expect here.
Yeah.
And you'll see an increase in their behavior as well. So be patient with yourselves and give yourself some grace as you both are kind of going over this hump. And that's the start of the momentum of change. But a lot of times we see families stopping right there and saying, well,
Mhm.
it's just gotten worse and it's
Mhm.
hard for me and it's hard for my kid and now I'm going to stop. But you've got to get over that first hump.
That is such a cruel trick. I don't know why
I
it does
know.
that, because even
The nature of human behavior.
because even like where there's been an addiction in the household and someone's in recovery and healthy, like it disrupts the whole flow of the system and makes, even though it's a really
Yes.
great thing and it's a
Yes.
healthier thing, it disrupts the patterns, and nobody's like, I don't know, I like, even if you're not yelling, like now I have no idea how you feel, because that I don't
Right.
know how to compute that.
Right.
Like,
Right.
are you mad? Are you seething? Is it coming out later? Like,
Right.
so
Yes.
so
Yes.
the God, it's hard
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
All right. So we're gonna end step 8, which is all of those
Yep.
all the F's.
All the F's.
All the F's.
There's a lot of F's out there.
The parenting ego. And we encourage you to reach out to us if you're curious about more of that. If we find some specific
Yeah.
resources that relate to those egos, we're gonna post that below too. And then we're gonna jump in and do our next video for step 9, which is facing your triggers. And we all have them, some little, some big.
But I love the way that she addresses triggers.
Yeah. So
Takes the power away, kind of.
catch us for the next one.
See ya.
All right. Bye. Thanks for watching. We appreciate your feedback as always.
Yes, please.